Hi, my name is Renford Reese. I'm a professor in the political science department at Cal Poly Pomona, director of the Colorful Flags program, and also the founder of the Reintegration Academy at Cal Poly Pomona. We're here today to have a candid conversation with Patricia Duran, the person who was responsible for our career development module for the Reintegration Academy. Patricia, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Reese. It's an honor to be here.
Okay, tell me about the Reintegration Academy experience for you. What were you thinking about before you actually came into the program, and what were your first experiences like dealing with these participants?
Well, initially when I received the call from you about doing a whole series of workshops, which is something we do all the time, so that's pretty natural. And so my approach to that was just providing services as a career counselor and understanding the population that we were doing that for. But then because I'm also a student here at Cal Poly Pomona, and I'm in the MPA program and actually one of your students, and when that became more of an opportunity to do that as a research topic, as a class, so then my focus shifted a little bit, where I really had to think, because there was going to be responsibilities on my part as a student to provide some scholarship at the end of the program. So I started changing my attitudes about that and really thinking in the modules that we created for the program, making sure they were relevant for that population, and not necessarily knowing their background, but knowing some history about parolees 18 to 25 and typically what the crimes could be like, because I didn't really know anything other than what you provided about the program and the students. So I adjusted a little bit, making sure that, again, it would be relevant, but in the first meeting, knowing I'd have to do some assessments to see where they're at, to see how far I could push them or how much I'd have to adjust it or tailor it. I do have to say, though, the first meeting day, I was extremely nervous. I have worked with those populations before. I used to teach courses for the city, like the welfare to work, and sometimes we'd have students in the program that were parolees or in those situations. So it wasn't like I was not familiar with them, but it was still being nervous. Will I be able to connect with them? Will I be able to relate to them? Because connecting to them is important, because they're not going to receive your message if they don't respect you or if they don't feel like you respect them as well. So I think that was the part that I was the most nervous to, because every environment is different. I work with college students, mostly freshmen through seniors and then some alum, but most of those are recent alum. And then I have some transfers that are seasoned students. But this is a different population, and so their level, how they socially engage, how they communicate, the norms that are appropriate is very, very different. So I think those things I was very nervous. You know, will I be too stuffy for them? Will I seem too aloof for them? And so really, really worried about that. And so that whole night I was just so nervous. And what do I wear? Will it be too professional in the sense that I just seem like a suit? Do I dress down? Do I dress in the middle? So, which seem like silly things, but for me as a career counselor, my role is to connect with these students, to establish trust, so this way they can engage and they can learn meaningfully. So, so after that first day, I felt that there was a good connection. I didn't feel like it went poorly, because you can tell when you haven't connected with your audience, and I felt like there was some connection there, which was optimistic for me, because then I had more comfort in everything else that I did for the remainder of the program.
Okay, so let's talk about the curriculum and your philosophy as it went on. So what were you trying to do increasingly? What was your overall philosophy?
Well, in career development and what we do, and this applies, I think, to any population, regardless of their environment, their grade level, or academically where they're at. And so I didn't really know academically where some of these young men were. And there was a population of them who had not graduated from high school. And there was actually a really large population of them who actually had some community college, a few of them who actually had completed their associate's degree. But so for me, career development starts with the first part of it is for them really getting to know who they are. knowing what they're good at, knowing their personality, what environments they're more successful in, and then looking at what are their interests. Because sometimes if you know that, that empowers you to look for things that are going to really complement your natural abilities and talents. You're going to be happier, you're going to stay longer in whatever it is that you do. And so it wasn't just focusing on jobs, but also focusing on education, because part of the goals of the program is getting them matriculated into a community college system or university, depending on where they were at. So helping them to know what would be the right major for them, what is the right career path. So then after that, then giving them those basic skills of making sure that your interviewing skills are good, that you know how to communicate effectively, appropriately, because some of the jobs that they've had, they either are going to be looking for similar jobs or they're going to be challenging themselves to look for other jobs where it might require a different skill set, and the sort of culture of how you interview or how you prepare your resume is different for that.
So let's step back and talk about the personality inventories and the value test that you were trying to, that you did apply to the students.
So the personality, we use the MBTI, which is a Myers-Briggs temperament inventory. And that was actually a really fun activity for the students. What I loved about this population versus what I get from college students, especially as they're in their sophomore year, junior year, and definitely their senior year, is that they were definitely very engaging, very open, were willing to really share personal information of how they felt they personally responded to the different results of the assessment. Because here I'm talking about them, which is, it's a very sensitive thing. You don't want to point fingers and say, though, this is how you are. So it was more turning it around and them embracing who they are, and also explaining why, for instance, they might not be as successful in certain areas, whether it's communication or work, etc. So what it does for students and what it did for them is it validated who they are, but it also helped to explain where they have challenges. So we would relate it like to their relationships or to their family or to their friends or even to their work environment, and they had those aha moments like, okay, this makes sense. And hopefully that empowers them then, because part of it is teaching them the tools. It's like, it's good to learn who you are. I always tell them it's like David Covey's principles, the 7 habits for highly effective people. One of them is seek first to understand. You need to understand yourself first to be able to better communicate with others. And for them, they had that moment. They were able to connect and understand that, and also know where they're strong in anything else that they do and the areas that they need to develop as well. So that was a really successful moment. The interest as well for the students, looking at their interest, and we use the strong interest inventory, which is based on John Holland's work, and looking at their interests as they relate to hobbies. For some people think, I want to do this career. I'm really good at math. I'm really good at science. I want to do that. But that might be a personal interest, or I'm really good at fixing things. I want to be an engineer. And well, that, engineering isn't always necessarily with tinkering with your hands. There's a lot of other layers involved in that. So helping them for themselves, understanding with their interests, which of these would complement a job and they'd be successful at, and which of these might be more hobbies or areas that they should develop as well. And also, again, that validates the things that they've done. Because I think for them as well, what I noticed is that sometimes there were criticisms about the way they were or the way they weren't, or the things that they did or the things that they didn't do. So for this, it gave them that language to be able to comfortably articulate with confidence, there's nothing wrong with me, this is just how I operate, and to be more successful in communicating with you, this is what I need.
Right. So tell me about session 3. Once you've actually kind of immersed yourself and the participants into your modules, what starts to happen after about session 3?
With the students or with the modules?
With the modules and the participants in the Reintegration Academy.
With the students, there definitely was a level of trust. So I was part of family, and they see things like that. And it's interesting because, and a lot of times when we're talking about whether it was like rules for how the etiquette for interviewing or etiquette for different kinds of work environments, or trying to explain things to them, it was interesting. they use their own personal experiences, and many times they'd use their experiences being in prison. It's like when you're in the joint, and this is how you do it. And, you know, it was interesting, but they were making those personal connections in order to go to the deeper level and understand it. But I felt like we really bonded. I felt like there was a comfort level, and it was challenging because I had to always maintain respect, because sometimes they have to feel comfortable to express themselves in a way that's comfortable for them, but not to cross those boundaries where, okay, now those jokes are a little bit inappropriate, you know. So it was a different kind of environment than I would have with a traditional college student at university. So I felt that there was trust. And I think as they got more comfortable, they were also more comfortable to vocalize if they weren't happy with something that I did as well, which is good. For me, it's good. You know, it's good that if you feel there's some miscommunication, that you vocalize that. I think with the curriculum, I realized that with the students, they did better with the hands-on, with the in-person, with the dialogue, with the discourse. But with the assignments, that's where there was a challenge for me. So getting them to engage and connect in class was not a problem. And I find that sometimes it's actually a problem with my traditional college students. They're either on their laptops or on their cell phones, or it's even difficult to get them to adhere to certain rules. I could tell these students from Reintegration Academy, no cell phones, and they respected that. I tell that to college students, and they don't respect that. So it was really interesting. Like, there was a different level of respect, but yet then there was a different level of the way we communicated, where someone would say, yeah, I don't know if that's appropriate. There was never anything inappropriate, but just the comfort level was different as well. So assignments didn't work as effective, whereas with my traditional college students, they do follow through more on the assignments. But it's also how they've more been socialized or programmed, because that's the route that they've been going, you know. So the course dialogue was good, but assignments were a little bit challenging.
Right. Okay. And so let's talk about the session that you had on mastering the interview.
The interview, and actually the interview process, we did a lot of prep for that. So we had lecture where we talked about interviewing, and then we actually did mock interview sessions, and we had actually, you helped in coordinating a different way of doing this. So it had some volunteers from the program, and we put them in separate rooms, and so they were really practicing. So I was just really impressed because it was like the trainer training them. So I trained them. These are things you're aware of. So then they were critiquing each other. So it was a peer critique versus the professionals, and like myself and the volunteers critiquing them. And they really did an amazing job of supporting themselves, you know, because the rules were, you know, give constructive criticism, but not criticism. And so at the event, they dressed up. And again, my comparison is because the brunt of what I do is with college students. It's interesting because they'll take it to a higher level. So where I'll have students dress up, it's hit and miss. For these gentlemen, all of them were dressed up. Some of them were in suits, some of them were in their dress shirts with their ties, and they looked sharp. I mean, they looked really good. Their hair was brushed. They were just very beautifully coiffed. And in that evening, as confident as these guys come out, because they all come in there, you know, I know who I am, don't mess with me. But you still saw some of those insecurities when they're in there, that nervousness, I don't know what to say. And then I think sometimes also for them, they don't have anything for me. And for me, it was like, this isn't about that. Okay, if you're able to find an opportunity, that's good, but this is practice for you. It's practicing you talking to strangers. It's practicing you knowing how to approach someone, shake their hand, engage in getting to know them, introducing yourself, giving them a little summary of you. So it's really giving them those social skills and helping them understand that. So sometimes when they didn't want to do that, I'd push them, just go do that. Just go talk to them. Just ask them these questions. And for some of them, in any classroom, there's always some students that just, I don't need this. They'll still do the work, but it's like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need this. And so they'll do a little bit, and then they just kind of step aside. But for the brunt of them, they really were engaging. The employers were really impressed in how they handled themselves, because we were going around and just observing and then talking to some of the employers. And they were just really impressed in how professional they were, and how they came with their resumes, and how they introduced themselves, shook their hand, and just really started engaging in conversation. So it was really it was very, it was really good to see how they took what they've learned and they applied it. And for some of them that were really, really nervous and not sure if I could do that, because maybe they were doing labor type of work where it was construction, or this is a whole different world for them. I think it also gave them that confidence and pride that, hey, I did good.
Okay. And so what was your overall experience?
For the students?
For the entire reintegration program?
I think for them, I think more than anything, it was someone believing in them, someone trusting them, someone respecting that they did have talents, or helping them recognize those talents and abilities. I think they go through the motions, but I think there is a moment for them that they might not verbalize because it's a different culture and how they carry themselves. But feeling that here you have these university professors, you have all these professionals in industry that they're coming and taking the time to spend time with them to either do a lecture or lead them in a session, and just there's something powerful about that, whether they express that or not. But the fact that the majority of these students consistently came, and they'd be here for like 4 or 5 hours. So that's a huge commitment. I mean, college students don't even have to do that. Their classes, the longest class is maybe 3 hours. But these guys sometimes were here 5 hours. And so I think they really enjoyed the experience. You could see how after a while they felt like, you know, I'm one of the students. They could use the gym. They got to eat in the cafeteria here on campus. As if for the experience for them, I felt like they left feeling a little bit more supported, a little bit with more pride, more confidence, especially those that didn't have that. Definitely empowered with more knowledge. So if they wanted to transition into community college, they knew how to do that. They understood some of the fundamentals. What's the difference between, you know, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, understanding university culture, what's that like, what the expectations are, and also understanding for themselves academically where they're strong and where they still needed to grow as well. I think the part that's really challenging, and I think that's frustrating that our society, in American society, does, is one of the questions that I dreaded getting from this student is, what do I put on my application? Which you're supposed to check the box, have you been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor? But knowing that automatically they're going to be stereotyped and no one's going to trust them and no one's going to give them an opportunity. And I think for me that was the hardest thing, because that question did come up, and honestly it was hard for me to answer that question, because it's true what they're saying, that we do label them and we won't give them a second chance, which then contributes to recidivism. You know, you have to earn money, you have to be able to support your families. And a lot of the research and the studies show that support, these programs, which we've lost funding for them, even in prisons where we used to have programs to earn your GED or to earn college credit, those have been eliminated. Any type of reintegration programs or parolee programs like these, because there are programs like this, budgets for those have been eliminated. But these are the things that they need to help them to be supported. They go back to their same communities. They're not changing environments. They're just out going back to the same thing. And if there's nothing there to support them, what other options do they have other than, well, I need to make money? And you figure out a way of doing it.
Right. So what was the banquet experience like for you?
The banquet, it was kind of like their prom. They all got dressed up, and it was in, we have a beautiful facility on campus, and we have conference services on campus, and it was in one of the conference rooms or the halls or the banquet rooms. And there was food and their families were there, but it really was, maybe not prom, but I guess for them, because that was their graduation ceremony. I mean, you could see the pride that they had in what it is that they did. Because for some of these students, maybe they didn't graduate from high school. Maybe they haven't had any kind of events where they had to set a goal, they had to work hard to achieve that goal, and they had to achieve that goal. And so this was the end of achieving that goal. It's you graduated, you set a goal, you stuck to it, you did the work, and now you're being recognized for that. You know, you're recognized by peers that are, or by, I don't want to say superiors, but by faculty or by professionals or by staff that had supported you through that process and are now here to honor you and to celebrate that you have had success for that, and also to say, hey, we're still here for whatever else that you need. You just need to call, you know. And so I think for them, it just there was a great deal of pride for them, and then for their families
right.
as well. And I don't know if there was limits as far as how many they could bring, but there were some people that brought, I mean, the table sat 10 and they needed 2 tables. They brought their family and their family's family. I mean, everyone was there, brothers, uncles, cousins. And then there was some who didn't have anyone there. But they became such a connected and a tight group of men that those that were alone, you know, they brought them into their family unit so they wouldn't be alone. So it was really neat to see that. And just, you know, the parents and the families and the brothers and the wives and the girlfriends and the kids of these men, just seeing the excitement and the pride and the hope for these guys.
Yeah. Okay, I want to thank you for coming in. I definitely want to thank you for being engaged and an integral part of the Reintegration Academy. I think without a doubt that was the most successful component of this program. And I think you did a wonderful job, and I can't thank you enough for what you did for those 20 participants in this program. And I think they'll be grateful to you for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you.
Okay.